Welcome to Attached, a platform for adding breadth and depth to everyday living. I'm Yakov Danishefsky, and this is the Shovavim series, a special release of tools and principles to help increase self-understanding and control for a life of elevated Kedusha. Continuing the theme from last time about normalizing and recognizing how widespread and common and normal this challenge is. One of the reasons, or one of the contributing factors to the challenge here, is that despite how prevalent it is, it's not something that's typically talked about in a particularly healthy way. We do often have a lot of exposure to these issues, but typically not from healthy sources or in healthy ways. Excuse me. In most people's developmental lives, they did not get a healthy education on these matters. And because of that, there are a lot of misconceptions. Oftentimes these misconceptions come from outside external sources that are problematic, exposure to things that are inaccurate in many, many ways and contaminating in many ways. But the truth is that actually a lot of the misconceptions also can sometimes come from within. And that's not to say, chas v'shalom, that the sources and the mamari chazal and the ideas that come from within are themselves problematic. Not in the slightest. But that oftentimes the way we understand them, because of a lack of context and a lack of proper hadracha in what they mean and how to understand them, they become misunderstood, and then they can be very challenging and very problematic. So one of the first things that I would encourage a person to think about if they're trying to work on this area is to try and think about what are my conceptions and my understandings of this taiva, of this nisayon, of this challenge, of how to understand when I or someone is nichshol or falls or has this struggle. How do I understand it? What is my understanding of this? What's the hashkafa I'm living with? I may have a conscious awareness of how I understand it, I may not. But we all have a certain understanding, a certain way that we process these topics. And where did I get it from? So one of the most helpful things a person can do is think about, what do I think a healthy perspective on this is? One way you can think about it is, if I'm zocheh to have a child, a boy, when he grows up, when he's getting older, when he's getting closer to the age of puberty, or when he's already at that point, what would I want him to know? What perspectives would I want him to have? What would I share with him? What would I tell him? What would I hope that maybe someone would tell him, someone who's the right person, which probably would be me if I'm his father? And are those the perspectives that I myself have? So the first exercise that I will share with you is what I call the talk I never had. And it's a sheet, it's a worksheet that I've made that will be shared here that you can take a look at. And if you actually do the worksheet, amazing, that's great. If you even just think about it, that's also great. It's thinking about, who did I need a talk from? Who did I need to be educated by? And what did I need to hear them say? What would have been helpful? What education did I need? And maybe there would be different pieces of education at different stages, different times in my life. Maybe one would have been much earlier, and then, pre-puberty, and then a little bit later, and then as a later teenager. What would I have needed to hear? And to even, if you can go so far as to make the time and have the discipline to do this, to sit down and actually write that letter. And in the process of doing that, it can be very helpful to try and learn more about what are the proper hashkafos to have on this. So I will recommend a book. There's a new book called From Boys to Men by Dr. Shlomi Zimmerman. has a forward from Aaron Feldman and has haskamas from many other major Rabbanim and Gedolim. And it's a phenomenal book that talks exactly about this topic, how to give over a healthy education to young boys, to boys of the proper age, what it talks about the age to do that, and how to give this kind of conversation over. And as is so often true, whenever someone shares chinuch tips or pointers or vadim on parenting, etc., things like that, really, so often it's really for ourselves too. And so I would read this book. You can read this book. You can order this book under the guise of, I need to learn how to give this over to a child or to others, or especially if I'm a Rabbi or anything like that, if I'm a mashpia of any sort, or if I'm a parent, but really for ourselves. And to read this book and think about it. There's also a website actually from someone here in Chicago, Rabbi Shmuel Tenenbaum, called Big Talks. That has some really nice resources. There are a lot of resources out there now. This new book is really phenomenal, From Boys to Men. And so to think about this, I think this is the first piece of work, is what is a healthy understanding of how I relate to this nisayon, how I relate to this area of my life, and what's the proper way? What's the accurate way? There's so many misconceptions about different Mamarei Chazal. Person can't do tshuva, it's chamor mikol averos, etc. How do I understand this part of myself and this part of my life? And to do this in a healthy and healthy Toradic way. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this, please follow us on WhatsApp, YouTube, or Instagram. All our podcast series can be found wherever you listen to podcasts. I'd love to hear from you, so please reach out with questions, comments, or suggestions, or to be added to our WhatsApp groups. You can reach us through email using Yakov, YAKOV, .attached@gmail.com, or on WhatsApp at 773-888-2413.